black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know.
I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage, all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight, Friday night. I hope your week's been treating you well. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen tonight. I'm releasing tonight's show. This would normally be Sunday's show, but I'm working on a member show for Sunday. But I really appreciate you guys being here tonight. We'll be talking to Dylin, and Dylin comes to us from Louisiana. He was a truck driver, and he pulled up to a logging site, and he had an encounter with one of these creatures. And it's always bothered him. Shortly after this encounter, he gave up truck driving and went to work at a mill, and I don't blame him. Then we'll be talking to Ned, and Ned is a former law enforcement officer from New York, and he'll be talking about an encounter he had back when he was a kid. And I find the behavior very ambush-like. It's really, for me, it's fascinating to hear this behavior that went on during his encounter. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member, get additional shows. But either way, I appreciate you guys being here tonight. Let's jump into it. I want to welcome Dylin to the show. Dylin, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you being here. And if you would you just kind of start from the beginning, kind of tell us what you were doing and walk us into what happened?
Well, when I was 18, I started driving a log truck for a company locally. And to start out the day, I'd wake up around midnight and go to the woods, get a load, and go to the mill. Our operation was set up a lot like most plants were, where they'd load a trailer, drop it out. All we'd have to do was drop the hook. I'd drop my empty trailer and went back under my loaded trailer. When I got out, you could smell, it smelled a lot like a mix between rotted egg and wet dog, but it wasn't a strong smell. No, I didn't think nothing of it because it had been raining for the past 2 days. I thought maybe the wet wood, rain, just created that real pungent smell. Well, I walked around my trailer and started throwing my straps, and I'd thrown the first two and made it to the third when I heard my truck door shut. I kind of blew it off as, maybe it's just the wind, a gust of wind come through and shut my door. Well, I went down and threw my last strap, and I noticed a movement to my right, close towards the front of the truck. When I turned to look, the first strap I had thrown is popping and tightening at like somebody yanking on it. I thought maybe another driver had snuck in, was pulling a prank on me, or maybe it might have just been the wind hitting it, causing it to do that. I get to the back of my trailer, set out my red flags, and we're required to have a blinking red light for nighttime driving. I set it. When I walked around to the driver's side of the truck to start tightening the straps, I looked up, and there's this, whatever it is, I mean, it was huge. I'm 6 foot, and this thing was at least a foot taller than me and built like a brick house. I mean, this thing was massive, just looking at me. His left arm, which come from shoulder maybe down a little bit past his butt, maybe, when it was covered in like wiry, matted hair, and his fingers and hands were actually kind of unproportional. The hand was big, but the fingers were more sausage-shaped than what normal humans would have. And all I could sit there and think was, I'm out here in the middle of nowhere by myself. 6 foot, 145 pounds. This thing looks like a bodybuilder's dream. And if it comes at me, there's no fighting back. I mean, that's it. I'm sitting there in fear, staring at this thing, and I noticed his head looking up and down, like from my toes to my head, back to my toes, back to my head, like he's just kind of eyeballing me. And that's when I realized the smell that I'd smelled out of the truck had done gotten stronger. Like it was close to me, and the smell was just overwhelming. This lasted, it felt like it lasted minutes, but probably more like 30 seconds. And it started backing away from me, closer towards the front end of the truck. After it kind of got even with my door, another driver had come in, and his light had kind of hit whatever it was, and I guess it spooked it because it just bolted for the tree line, which was about 20, 25 feet away, and it made it there in about 3 seconds flat. I mean, this thing was moving. When the other driver got there, it just so happened the other driver was a cousin of mine. He'd seen me kind of shaking and nervous. He asked me what was wrong, and I explained to him what happened, and he said, well, maybe you should lay off the cough syrup, because at this time I was suffering from the flu, and I was taking cough syrup. It kind of demoralized me that one of the people that was supposed to have my back, that I've known all my life, just didn't believe me. Like, he thought I was crazy, and from that point on, I'm 26 now. It's been 8 years. Every time I go to a family function or anything with my family, it's turned into a joke. Like, you know, maybe there's a Bigfoot over there. You should go look and see what it is. You know, it was a terrifying experience. When I finally made it back to the truck, I could smell what smelled like burnt hair. I don't know if he may have brushed up against the smokestack on the truck, and the heat from it singed some of his hair. I couldn't find it. But yeah, it was scary. I mean, I didn't know what its intentions were. I think it was more curious than it was aggressive, and didn't seem like it was trying to show aggression towards me. But you just don't expect to see stuff like that at 2 o'clock in the morning. You don't expect to see that in the daylight in a crowd of people. You don't, when you're by yourself in the dark with hardly any light and seeing that's terrifying. I mean,
yeah, it makes me wonder too why it would get so close to you. But as you and I talked off the air, I mean, I've heard from many truck drivers who pull over and this thing's right, you know, all of a sudden this thing shows up. There was one truck driver I had on, I don't remember if it was a member show or a public show, but he had pulled over and he got a call. He had to adjust the thermostat, something with the thermostat. The trailer was carrying food and it was getting too warm, so alarms are going off. And he stopped and he was trying to fix that. And he looked up and this thing's looking right at him, right across the trailer bed, just standing there looking at him. And it's terrifying, you know, when you're out there and, you know, if you don't really believe in Bigfoot or you're not really sure, you know, it's not the first thing that comes to your mind. And then all of a sudden it's real and it's right in front of you. It changes your life. And it does hurt when family members don't believe. You know, you can take it when the public's like, oh, you're a liar. But when it's family, it hurts more. Was there any other details that you remember?
Not really. When he had made it to about the door and the light actually hit the door, it kind of illuminated his face. His face wasn't, to me, it wasn't a primate face, but it wasn't a human face. It was kind of it was closer to primate, but it wasn't like an ape or a gorilla. I mean, he had the wide, pushed-in nose, but it just didn't throw off the image of being a primate.
And how far away from you was this thing when you first noticed it?
The trailer I had was, I think, was about 38 feet long. He was right at the front of the trailer, and I was right at the back of the trailer, so roughly 38, 40 feet.
I almost wonder if the crews had seen anything out there, the guys doing the lumber out there. I wonder if they had ever experienced anything. I would imagine, though, after all the, getting poked fun at, you just kind of shut up and didn't really bother to talk to anyone or anything.
Yeah, I didn't really ask anybody because, like you said, after they just kind of turned it into a punchline, I just got tired of being picked on for it. I didn't think anybody believed me or would even confess to it if they seen what I was going through, so I just didn't ask. But it's like what you had said when you was off the air, a lot of the reports come from old logging sites or established logging sites. So I don't believe I probably wasn't the only one that seen it, but I was probably the only one that said anything. Because in our area, not many people think a Bigfoot would be in Louisiana. Like all of my life, I've heard this has been more of an Oregon, Washington, Pacific Northwest creature. So when you actually see one this far south, it's like, wow, maybe that is my problem. It's not just their problem. Even if somebody comes forward nowadays around here and it comes up in the newspaper, they're called stupid or called a liar. Or people think they're on some kind of drug or had been drinking or something. But I've smoked plenty of weed in my life, and I've never seen a Bigfoot. I've been drunk plenty of times at parties and have never seen a Bigfoot. I mean,
yeah, and that's it. That's the argument right there. When people say, oh, how much are you drinking? How much were you smoking? I mean, you hit it on the head. I mean, you can smoke all the weed you want and you're not going to see monsters. You can drink all you want. You're not even cough syrup. I mean, it's such a ridiculous way to pass someone off as you didn't see what you thought you saw. I think it's interesting how it was kind of looking you up and down. Almost, did you get the feeling like it was sizing you up?
Yeah, I did. And I don't know why it was sizing me up. I don't know if it was just curious as to what I was doing there or if it thought I was food. But for the amount of time it just sat there and looked at me, I don't think it was really intending on being aggressive. I mean, if it wanted to be aggressive, as soon as I seen it, it could have had me because it caught me off guard. Like, I wouldn't have known what to do in that split second. And with how fast this thing ran, that 20 to 25 feet from the truck to the tree line, it wouldn't take nothing to just run straight over me, pick me up, do whatever it wanted to with me. But it just stood there looking at me. That's why I think it was more curiosity of what I was doing there, what the truck was doing, what the trailer was, and all that, instead of out to harm me. Which I don't know what it was thinking. I can't read minds. I really don't want to know what was in its mind at that moment in time. But I just think it was more curiosity of, hey, this is a pretty small creature. I've never seen them this small before, but
yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say what its intentions were. Go ahead.
I wasn't curious about it. I just wanted it to leave.
Yeah, that's usually the way it goes. And it's interesting too. You got the smell. A lot of people, they report the smell. Sometimes, not always, not in every encounter. I have heard of many encounters where people report the smell, and I could see you passing it off when you get out of the truck and, there's fresh cut lumber. Maybe there's something rotten. May have been raining. I could see you passing that off. Do you think it was a creature, what you were smelling?
I believe so, because now that I've actually changed jobs from logging to actually working in a lumber mill and smelling actual soaked wood, the smells are completely different. I mean, soaked wood smells a lot like a fart. Like, pardon that, but that's exactly what it smelled like. And that, what I smelled, like I said, was a mixture of rotted food and wet dog. I mean, that's the only way I could describe that smell. And it wasn't as strong when I got out of the truck, but when I was face to face with it, it was overwhelming. I mean, that's really the only sense I had was the smell and the fear.
Why do you think it closed the door? Was it blocking its view of you? Or what's your opinion on that? Why do you think it actually closed the door of the cab?
I don't really know, because when the door was shut, I was on the complete opposite side of the truck. So it may not even known that I was on that side of me. It probably did if it seen me pull up and watch me get out. But like I said, I'd left the driver's side door open, and I was on the passenger side this whole time with the door shut and the strap started popping back and forth. So it might have just shut the door. I don't know why it shut the door. It just could have been doing it out of curiosity. Like I said, just investigating what it was. It was like the strap. It might have just been pulling on the strap to see what that did. But even after, like in the daylight, the truck I had was a black truck, and it was covered in dirt. Like I said, it had been raining. It had mud, dirt, and all that. I looked up and down the door and could not find a handprint of any size. I couldn't find my handprint, couldn't find its handprint. So I don't know if maybe it actually shut the door or if it was the wind, but that truck door was pretty heavy. You actually have to put some force into it, and the wind wasn't really blowing hard enough in my head to shut the door. I've never had the wind shut the door on that truck. This thing could have definitely shut it. I mean, if I can do it, that thing's twice the size of me, it could have done it. And I think it did. But
yeah, and smelling...
Why, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And smelling that burnt hair smell, almost like it got too close to the truck, that's interesting that you picked up on that. What do you think its intentions were? Do you think it was just curious? Or do you think it was actually looking to take you and things were about to get real before that other truck came up?
Honestly, I think it was more curious, because in any situation that I've noticed when, especially with humans or watching National Geographic about animals, when you mean harm to something, you don't back away from it. And this thing, it stood there for about 30 seconds, but it started backing away. I mean, it wasn't coming at me. It wasn't making any kind of vocalization. When it ran away, it kind of had a huffing grunt kind of sound, like it was actually running, but it just backed away from me. So I think he was more curious as to what was happening at that moment around the truck and the trailer and seeing what it was. I think he was just coming to investigate what this was in his front yard.
Yeah, it could have been. What do you think that they are, Dylin? What's your honest opinion? What do you think that these creatures are?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people want to say they're primates, but I don't really think they're primates. And it's really hard to categorize them as humans when they actually show more primate features, but I don't believe they're either of the two. I believe it's more of an undocumented species that we've yet to discover, but at the same time, I don't believe it's of primate or human origin. It could be a cross between the two of them, but I just don't know. That's a very broad question.
Yeah, it is. And there's no wrong answer. I mean, you could be 100% right on your theories. It's one of those things, thank God that it didn't come after you. Because of, what I know of these things, I think if that thing would have came after you, there's no way you would have stopped it. It could have done whatever it wanted, and there's nothing you could have done about it.
And I think that's one of the biggest fear factors of it for most people, is usually when you encounter these things, you're alone. If you disappear for no reason, nobody's going to find you or know why you disappeared.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder, too, about some of those missing person cases where they find the car running, door open, and the person's vanished. But luckily, in this case, it just seems like it was more curious. Has it changed your life at all after seeing this thing?
Yeah. When I was younger, I didn't really, I was okay with it, but it wasn't really a concern of mine. And now I've actually investigated into it. I've read into it. I went on camping trips by myself to see, and in that exact area actually, to see if I could see it again. As far as my family's concerned with the jokes, I don't really go around my family anymore because family's supposed to be there. They're not supposed to make a joke out of something that absolutely terrified you. I mean, I wouldn't do it to anybody. They shouldn't do it to anybody else. But actually doing a lot more research. I've read books. I've bought movies and watched National Geographic documentaries on it. I used to watch Finding Bigfoot, but that seemed to be more of a stage thing after so long than it was actual Bigfoot hunting.
Yeah. Keep your head up. Like I always say, it's fun and games until you run into one, and then it changes your whole opinion on what's out there and what's not out there. You know what I mean? And I'm just thankful that it didn't harm you. It changes your view of the world, doesn't it? I mean, you stop and go, well, what else is real? It kind of opens your mind to maybe I don't know everything that's out there after you see something like this. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I mean, it's like I said when we were off air, if they can have humans and primates, why couldn't they have Bigfoot? Or the universe is vast. Why would Earth be the only one with life on it? I know a lot of people think Bigfoot's an alien, but I don't necessarily believe Bigfoot's an alien. I mean, I personally don't believe it's an alien.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Like in your encounter, it was kind of like encountering an animal. And correct me if I'm speaking out of turn.
No, that's exactly how I'd seen it. Except this animal is something I didn't expect to encounter, and it was a lot bigger than me.
Yeah, absolutely. I get what you're saying. Well, Dylin, thank you again for coming on. I really do appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Next up on the show, I want to welcome Ned. Ned, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I know you had a pretty terrifying encounter, really, in New York a couple of years back. If you would you just kind of start from the beginning? Tell us what you were doing and walk us into what happened.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Okay, it was back in 1994, late August. I don't remember the exact day, but it was late August. I had just turned 19. And a close friend of mine lived in a nearby town called Glenmont, New York. And I was staying up and hanging out with friends and stuff, and I had a couple drinks, which probably shouldn't have been because I was under 21, but I didn't get, terribly plastered or anything, but I had a couple of beers, and I wanted to let that all wear off before I drove. And I didn't feel like staying over at his house, so I waited till pretty late in the evening, well, really early morning. It was around 4 a.m., and I decided to drive home so I could just sleep at my own house. And I drove, as I normally would, down the county route. And I'll say this much. I don't want to give the exact location because I don't want a bunch of curiosity seekers conversion on the area or anything like that, but I can give you the general area. It was in Albany County, and I was on Route 85. And I got to a point along Route 85 where there's a bridge. And as I came up on the bridge, my vehicle started to sputter as though I was having a fuel delivery issue. And I came basically to a stop right on the bridge. And I got out and did a few assessments and decided I thought pretty positively it was my fuel pump. And it turned out later I was right. But I was basically a dead duck there. I couldn't drive anymore. It was like way too late to call for a ride or anything. So I kind of had no choice but to lock up my vehicle and leave it and walk the rest of the way home, which was probably about 2 or 3 miles away. So nobody's up at this point, obviously. There's hardly anyone on the road. And the quickest route for me home was down this one road, which it comes into Route 85, and pretty quickly it disappears into where it's a dark road. It's a very dark road. And general setting was there really weren't any houses near my vehicle, but once I turned left and went up this one road, there were a couple of street lights, and then the scene was on the right-hand side, an apartment complex. All the lights are out in the apartment complex, and then on the left side, there's basically forest. And there's a creek down there, a pretty sizable creek that goes on quite a ways. It's a tributary to the Hudson River. And I started to walk up this road, and I passed the streetlights. And as soon as I got past the streetlights, I was alerted to my left off in the forest by a very violent shaking sound of a tree. And I looked, and it was a full moon that night. I could see the treetops pretty clearly silhouetted. They were backlit. And pretty much the tallest tree around back there, and it was probably about around 200 yards back into the forest. The top of this tall tree, as I said, probably the tallest tree around, was just violently shaking. I mean, 10, 12 feet or so in either direction, just thrashing back and forth. And needless to say, it was attention-getting, and it was very strange. So I stopped, and I'm watching, and I'm trying to ascertain what would be causing this. I thought, indigenous animals, of course. That's the first thing you think. You're a rational thinking person, and you're going through the obvious, and I'm thinking a raccoon or, at the most, a black bear. That's like the largest animal around that could possibly be in a tree that would be indigenous to my area. And right away, I'm like, that's too much to be a raccoon. At the minimum, this has to be some sort of a bear, like a black bear or something. So I'm watching, and the shaking stops. And then there's a pause, and then the shaking starts again, and it's again really violent, and then it stops. And then more of a swaying happened, where the treetops swayed to the right and swayed to the left, like something hanging on the tree was leaning back and forth and making it sway. And I started to think, now that's really, really weird. And, I just couldn't stop watching because I'm alone on this road. It's dark. There's nobody around, no one watching. I have no one around me. And I'm trying to figure out and identify whatever this is because, should I be worried about it? Is it a threat? So after the swaying happened for just a few moments, probably 5, 6, 7 back and forths, and then that stopped. And then I heard something on the tree moving, like climbing type of movements. And then I heard just what I could only describe as a sickening thud of something massive hitting the ground. When I heard that, I was really in doubt as to whether it could even be a black bear because, I could discern that the weight of it was extremely high. I figured it had to have been something that weighed over 800 pounds or close to 1,000 pounds or something. It sounded like a boulder hit the ground. And I'm already thinking, like, if that even is a bear, it would have to be like a grizzly bear or something. It sounded like a cow or something hit the ground. It was just, it was a sound that was more than a sound. It was, it reverberated through the ground. Like I could feel it through the ground. I started to get really concerned at that point. And, not for everybody, but in my own personal case, I mean, I started saying prayers of protection and stuff like that too, because I started to feel threatened after I heard that. Something was on the ground. It was very big, and it wasn't awfully far from me, and I'm the only person around. So a few moments pass, and then it sounded like, a large stone or a large, very solid piece of wood was being bashed into the tree. And it was a very loud, very mighty sound. And down in the forest, it actually is a defile. It goes down a pretty abrupt drop off the left side of the road where I was looking into, and the creek winds its way back through that area, and it's like various heights of a gorge back in there. So it made an echo. It was just like ba ka 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 ka, ba ka 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 ka, ba ka 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 ka. I heard it just like that. It was these three really loud knocks, which I came to understand were tree knocks. And I had heard a little bit about tree knocks before, and once I heard that, I was already like, oh my God, this is like a Bigfoot or something, Thoughts were coming fast. Everything was happening in a rapid succession, and I'm trying to adapt to the situation. And no sooner was I trying to decide what to do when this creature that was back in there, it broke into a full sprint, and it ran straight towards me. And I couldn't see it, but I could sure hear it. Its feet hitting the ground, and just, it doesn't do it justice, but I'd like to even imitate. It was like bash, 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 crash, bash, 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 bash. And then there was pauses in there where I could tell it was jumping because it would catch air. The footsteps would stop in mid-run, and then it would hit the ground and keep running. It ran so fast and agile through the woods. It made a Star Olympic athlete look like ridiculously insufficient. It had a speed and a grace and a power to it as it ran through the forest, which was just supernatural to me. It was awe-inspiring. And at this point, I'm bracing for attack. I'm preparing myself for an attack because I already had looked behind me at this apartment complex, and my best option would have been, if I were going to run, I would have had to run across the street up into this apartment complex, hope to scramble and find a door, and be, just basically banging on someone's door at 4 o'clock in the morning. And it didn't seem like I was going to find any aid that way. And I knew, hearing this thing run, that I wasn't really going to be able to outrun it anyway. So I faced it, and I backed up a bit, and I basically prepared for attack, And it ran all the way up to me, and right when I'm ready for it to leap out onto the road, it stopped. It just stopped dead, and it was only like 10 feet away. I'm standing there in shock, and this thing is there, and I can't see it. It's staying just inside the shadows. There was a guardrail on the side of the road, and then a little bit of bramble brush, and then a very steep drop off, almost immediate, like a 45-degree drop. And it stayed just in the dark, just on the other side of the brush, the main side brush, and down in the drop off. And I could feel its presence there, and I heard it push out a couple of sharp breaths. It didn't growl. It didn't stink with the odor that everybody, well, not everybody, but is commonly reported, this very foul odor that can be emitted. None of that happened, and I heard these sharp breaths. They were just like a few sharp breaths, almost like it was catching its breath. It certainly didn't sound like it was out of breath, even considering the sprint that it just did. It covered about, I would say, approximately about 200 yards of distance in 10 seconds flat. And that wasn't even in a straight line. It was running uphill, downhill, jumping over things, zigzagging. Okay, so it's there. It's literally 10 feet away by the time it got to me. And I created a little distance. I backed up to where I was maybe, 15 feet away from it. And it stayed perfectly still. And so I stayed and I faced it, and I sidestepped up the road in the direction I was heading, and I tried to just quietly keep facing it and walking away, and hopefully it wouldn't persist. It hadn't jumped out and attacked me directly, so I thought maybe it will stay or something, and I'm just going to try to keep walking here. So I didn't want to turn away or sideways to it too much or give it my back just in case it jumped out at me. But I moved sideways, and once I got about 15 or 20 feet up the road, it very suddenly started moving again, which of course really, it was scary. It could have been on the attack. It could have decided that was it. It was coming to jump me right there. But instead, it ran up the side from where it was. It stayed on that drop-off, and it paralleled me, and it ran past me. And it ran past me another, I don't know, probably 25 or 30 feet, and it stopped again. So it was making me, basically, if I was going to continue in the direction I was going, it was making me have to pass it again. And, I felt, what should I do here? Should I run? Should I? But I already knew, like, running was going to be futile. So I thought, all right, I'm going to have to pass it again. And I kept walking up, and I got to where it was and bracing myself for whatever. And I kept going. I passed it again, and I got a little ways up further, and it didn't jump me, but it ran past me again. And it did the same exact thing. It repeated that process. It ran past me, and it stopped 10, 15 yards up. And it made me pass it again. So at this point, I'm not totally relaxed, obviously, at this point, but I'm starting to feel better anyway, that it had opportunities already to fully attack me if it wanted to. So I started to feel that maybe it wasn't going to attack me. And, I'm saying prayers under my breath this whole point. And I passed it. And then it passed me again. And it stalked me like this for something between an eighth and a quarter of a mile. I finally got to the end of the guardrail was basically in place to stop, vehicles from going off the road and going over this defile. That's, I think, the reason they had the guardrail situated there was that there was this steep drop off. And when I got to the end of the drop off and the end of the guardrail, it settled itself for a final time. I walked past the end of the guardrail, and the woods ended not too far after that. To an extent, they were still very, very much back behind, and to the left side of me, there was still a lot more woods. But this is an area where a residential property cut in, and there was a lawn there, and there wasn't any more cover for it that was near the road. So I went past another probably 25 to 35 feet, and I stopped and I turned around, and at this point I'm not hearing anything, and the sun is starting to come up. So little by little I started to be able to see into the forest more, and I'm looking so hard as I can in the trees, and I'm thinking, at this point it passed me, I'm sure 4 to 6 times. It had run past me like it had previously done. So I was already feeling fairly secure that it wasn't going to necessarily attack me because it had so many chances to do it already. And now I was away from the cover. So I stopped and I turned around, and I was thinking to myself, boy, I'd like to even just catch a glimpse of this thing, as long as I'm here anyway, and as long as, there's nothing I can really do to change the situation anyway. I was really hoping to be able to catch an eyeball on it. So I'm looking into the forest as hard as I can, and everywhere I can scan, including where I thought that I heard it last stop, and even off into the back of the forest as far as I could see, to see if I could see it walking away or anything, but I didn't see anything. So I started to cautiously reverse direction, and I would take about 3 steps at a time back towards where it was, and I would take a few steps, and I would lean right and left far to try to see around the trees and see if I could see an arm, a shoulder, something sticking out that would be enough for me as long as I saw it there. If I saw anything sticking out, I definitely would have just turned around and just kept walking away. I just wanted to see it somehow. And I edged closer a few steps at a time, looking like that. Wasn't seeing anything. And then I got up to pretty close to where I heard it stop. And I didn't go all the way to that spot because if it were hiding there, I didn't want to get grabbed or something. But I got to within probably 15 feet of where I thought I heard it stop last. And just looking as hard as I could, and, it was gone as far as I can tell. I mean, obviously it's something that was expert in stealth and hiding. And there's the offhand possibility that it just stayed so perfectly still because the light was still filtered. It was still pretty dim. There's the offhand possibility that it had such discipline that it could stay absolutely perfectly unmoving, and somehow it did avoid my detection. But as far as I could ascertain, it was gone. And then, I looked back into the forest as far as I could. More and more light was coming every moment. When the sun comes up, the light comes quickly, and within 5 minutes, it's a whole different world. So at this point, I could see pretty well back into the woods, and I didn't see it retreating. I didn't see it off, in the furthest extent of my range of sight or anything like that. And I didn't hear a thing. When it was gone, it was like it vanished. It was just like it vanished. And that was pretty much it. And at that point, I turned around and walked home and just processing the whole experience.
What did you think was going on at that time? I know you had mentioned Bigfoot before, but gosh, I would imagine if I was in that situation, if it's a cougar or if it's a bear, and I don't know if you guys even really have those in that area, but if they're going to attack you, they're going to attack you. They're not going to play games with you. They're just going to come and get you, or they're going to leave. It's either one or the other. And the behavior of it running ahead of you and stopping makes me always wonder if that was like a trap to get you to run, and so it could grab you, you know what I mean? Get you a little startled and it was ahead of you. It could easily come out, and I mean, just my theory. But what did you think was going on at that time, Ned?
Well, I have a lot more of a developed opinion about it now than I necessarily did then. I mean, I was always interested in these kind of topics. And, my kindergarten, my first book on cryptic animals had Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster. It all started when I was a young kid. So I had some knowledge of Bigfoot at the time, but I didn't have a lot of detailed knowledge that I have now from over the years doing a lot more research. So what I think was going on, if I were to give it a summary of what I think was going on, there's a lot of discussion about the creature and its intelligence and its ability to be tactical and to use stealth and cover and everything like that, and also to set up ambushes. There's a lot of discussion about how it hunts deers. They use group tactics. They use pretty highly developed strategies and things when they're hunting. Well, what I think is that when I broke down on the road over by the bridge, I think it already had a bead on me. I think it was in an observation point up at the top of the tree, and it was in a pretty commanding view of everything around. And, it's pretty widely known now how they're mainly nocturnal. They've got this incredible night vision ability, and they can stay very far away from a human being and observe them without being observed because of their superior night vision. Well, I think it was keen to my presence all the way when I started walking from my vehicle. And I think it waited until I got in the dark. And once it saw that I was a perfect ambush opportunity, no witnesses around, all the people were asleep. And interestingly, this apartment complex was right on the opposite side of the road, but there wasn't any lights on or anything. 99% everybody in that apartment complex was in mid-REM sleep. And I think that had something to do too with why it didn't vocalize or make or growl or emit the odor or anything. I think it was really, I think it did have it in mind to pick me off. And I do feel like if I ran from it, it somehow or another would have and gave it permission to grab me or something. I think facing it, and I was using strong verbals against it too. I was actually, I didn't know if it could understand me or not, but I felt like it might. I was issuing threats and things to it, and I was facing it, and I was holding my hands up wide. I had a wide stance with my hands wide apart and everything like that. And because, basically they teach you that, like if you get confronted by a bear or a predator in the woods, there's two schools of thought. One school is lay down on your face or something and be submissive. And then the other is make yourself as big and powerful and scary as possible to a predator, right? So that's what I felt inside that the right thing to do would be to face it, because like I couldn't have ran away from it anyway, and I felt like if I did, if it was going to get me, it was just going to get me from behind. And I just, for lack of a better way of putting it, I just wouldn't want to go down like that, So I figured if the thing was going to attack and basically kill me, I was going to do it as much harm as I possibly could. And I expressed myself towards it that way, And then after it passed me a few times and it didn't get me, I started to feel pretty confident that its highest motivation level for attack had to have gone past, because it in the beginning of the encounter would have been the prime time it would have taken me if it was going to. So I think it did have me singled out as, I think that's what, I read a couple of the books by David Paulides and the Missing 411 series. And I don't think that all of the disappearances that he describes in his books can be attributed to any one thing. But I think that maybe a portion of them, with a few particular cases being standouts, were abductions by these creatures. I do believe that. There's a lot of clues in there about the ambush predator opportunity type of modality that it has. Like singling out the last people in line, grabbing people when like a very keenly timed point when there's no witnesses. Someone walks around a bend behind the rest of their hiking group and they're never seen again. Someone hikes way ahead of the group to get to the next point because they're a better, more energetic hiker than the rest of the people, and the rest of the group gets there and the person's not there and they're never seen again. And then of course people going in by themselves, and there's more than one case in there where someone broke down by the road or in an area, a parking area or whatever, and they find an empty vehicle, sometimes running, and the person's gone. You know what I mean? So I think it was like this creature assessed the situation and determined that I was ambushable and that it had a good probability of getting away with me without any witnesses. I really do feel that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that they are ambush predators, and I think you did the right thing. I mean, you start screaming at it, and you're cussing at it, and you're, telling it off. It's that fight or flight, man. Kicks in. People run, or they'll stop and fight. In your case, you would have lost the fight, but, who knows? You jab it, take an eyeball out with your thumb, or it's going to hurt when it comes to get you. You're going to lose, but, and maybe that's what got it to back off. It's really hard to say. Did you tell anyone? Because I know you were at your friend's house, which isn't far from there, and you guys have heard strange vocalizations.
Well, I told people about it after. I was alone at the time, completely alone. But I had come from my friend's house. This same friend whose house I left, he had moved and started a family and moved to a nearby town, which was like 8-10 miles away from there. So I was most of the way home when my car broke down and this happened. But he used to live on a street that was probably a quarter to half a mile from where the incident happened. And he had, on his own, just from being home and every once in a while walking outside front of his house to get some fresh air and hanging out on his driveway, he was hearing screams in the woods. And he told me about it a couple of times. And the one night I was over at his house, he brought me out and he showed me. And I heard them too. And that's not the only time I personally heard those kinds of screams in the general area. Not in the exact same spot, but over the years, I had heard these kind of screams. So we're standing there, and it was way out in the woods. And generally speaking, it was the forest where this thing came from. And the night of that incident, it was generally that swath of forest, and it sounded like a banshee scream. Just like a blood-curdling woman. People talk about the woman being murdered sound, I think that's what they're talking about. But it has a high range to it and also a low range to it, though, where it's like in one voice, it's outside of like what you would expect a human to do. And, we heard this stuff. It was probably, I want to say half a mile or so away. It was, it was pretty far what we were hearing, but it was, obviously not any kind of animal that we knew. We didn't know whether it was demonic or what, but it was definitely disturbing sound,
Well, let me ask you, what do you think that Sasquatch is, Ned? And there's no wrong answer, so I'm just curious on what your personal opinion is. I realize you didn't see the creature, but you had this experience, which is terrifying. And I would argue the point, sometimes it's more terrifying not seeing what's coming for you as opposed to what's coming, seeing what's coming for you. But what do you think that they are?
Yeah, agreed. Well, I'd say that my opinions over what it is have actually changed over the years, and it's something that's in process because, well, let's face it, it is a mystery. But I'm at the point right now where I think it is a lineage of ancient human that has DNA differentiation from normal humans. I've looked into this Sasquatch DNA project that was done, and David Paulides was actually a part of that. But what struck me about that project was the comprehension level and professionalism level of the people involved in it. Apparently, a benefactor with a lot of money donated like $500,000 to get this done. And the people that went out and collected the evidence were all former law enforcement people and stuff along those lines, were professional level evidence collector technicians that knew chain of custody and everything. And they got a lot of hair samples, and I guess they even got some blood and things. And are you familiar with this, Wes?
I am, yeah.
I would imagine so. So I don't remember the name, but there was a female forensic technician that offers services to law enforcement, a professional person that deals with crime scene evidence and things like that, had a really strong reputation for providing professional services to law enforcement agencies. And so we're not talking about, backyard scientists here. And they took the samples, and she did the pre-processing. There's two types of DNA evidence. There's a mitochondrial DNA, and then there's cellular DNA. And mitochondrial DNA will tell you an awful lot of basic information, and then the nuclear DNA will go into much more extreme detail. And she was able to do mitochondrial DNA, and she was coming up with human. And she couldn't do the nuclear DNA, but she sent these samples out to, I guess, some pretty reputable places, university laboratories of high reputation and things. She wasn't going to name them. She snuck some of the names out, I think, though, from what I remember in the interviews, but she was trying not to. But, at least 3 major universities she sent these samples out to and stuff. And what they came back with was pretty disturbing. And quite honestly, like, their status quo couldn't handle it. But they were coming up with half human and half unknown. Like, the known DNA examples from the animal kingdom, like, they couldn't cross-reference what the lineage of the father was. They came up with human female, and they came up with unknown male, and I tend to believe them. I tend to believe that, just because of the professional level and reputation of the people involved in that, I tend to believe that they're presenting information on a professional level, I know it's swept under the rug to an extent, and still there's a lot of skepticism involved in it. And then you go back to the Native Americans, and they always described them being a tribe of what they consider to be a type of people. And there's a lot of corroborating early histories that talk about, like, the Lakota Sioux, how in time of starvation, a certain tribe turned itself towards black magic and consuming human flesh in time of starvation and all of this, and they became evil, and it actually caused some sort of change. Now, I don't know how much of that is real or true, but they believe it. And due to this, evil tribe of natives arose that were basically what a lot of them considered to be Sasquatch or Bigfoot, along different names, Wendigo or Rougarou or any of that. And they actually had a war with these things and chased them across the continental United States until finally to the West Coast. Just a lot of other tribes corroborated too, where they describe these, giant hairy people that they considered a tribe. And if you follow that, I do have a theory here. Okay, let me explain this too. The Native Americans described them using structures, like they had houses. When the Native Americans talked about these people coming up on their camps and stealing animals or children or stuff like that too, they talked about female Sasquatches that carried woven baskets. There's reports of these things being used making fire, that they actually can make fire. Yeah, my theory on this is that, and not everybody might agree with me, but I think they're a genetically aberrant human, and I think they're highly intelligent. I think they know they will never fit in with human society, okay? I think they know that the worst possible thing that can happen for them is discovery, because they've already been hunted down in a huge era of warfare and hunted almost to extinction. And I think they've made an art form out of hiding and being I think they're the ultimate survivalists. I think they've highly honed an art form of deep forest survival for the pure practical purpose of evading being destroyed. And I think due to this, they stopped using fire. I think they stopped making obvious things that were like man-made. I think they've more and more taken on the persona of beasts, and they've probably developed in that direction too, but purely out of need. I really, that's my thought on it. Yeah, and like I said, you could be right. It's no one has to agree with your opinion or disagree with your opinion, because no one truly knows. And the person, and you could go with the argument that they hunt like an animal, but they're smart like a human. And they're intelligent on how they hunt, how they surround, just like your encounter. What mountain lion is going to run 25 feet ahead of you, stop and wait for you to show up? That's not how they hunt. That's not how any animal hunts. If you're going to ambush someone,
That sounds more like human-like behavior. I'm not saying they're human, but that's more thought process than, you know, a mountain lion's just going to run you down. Bear's just going to run you down. You start screaming and yelling and cussing and swearing and putting your arms up. They're either going to leave or they're going to attack. They're not going to sit and play games with you. I can't think of any other animal on this planet that would do that. And going back to your point, you were mentioning Melba Ketchum down there in Texas. And I've invited Melba to the show. You know, I told her, you know, it'd be a fair interview. I'm not going to all of a sudden become a jerk since she's on the show. I wanted to hear what she had to say, you know, because there's so many different rumors about Melba and, you know, the Bigfoot world, which I'm not a part of, but, you know, it's all drama queens and a bunch of idiots arguing with a bunch of other idiots. And, you know, my offer to Melba was, hey, would you like to come on the show and kind of break down what you found and kind of explain it to me in a way and to the audience in a non-scientific way as much as you can, what you found, because I'm fascinated to know what she found. You know, I'm just a dumb guy. I read the report and I understand about 25% of it, and the rest of it I get lost in. And you know, every researcher hasn't, you know, they have these feelings towards Melba. It's like, well, have you guys actually talked to her? Well, no. Well, what are you talking about then? You know what I mean? But I understand too, and she's by no means has to come on here in answer to me or anyone else. That's not what the point of the interview was. I really was curious on what she found. But she refused to do it, and I respect that. You know, no hard feelings on it. But I really wish that she would, because I'm curious on let's get past the rumors. Let's get past all these huge egos in the Bigfoot world. Let's get past all the nonsense, and let's find out what you actually found. You know, and walk through what you found. Just of my own curiosity. But anyway, and I hope that comes across the right way. I don't mean to bash Melba by any means. She's more than welcome to come on the show now and in the future if she changes her mind. But I would be interested in knowing what she knows from her, instead of, you know, some guy in Kentucky that, you know, he's the Bigfoot researcher and he's going to solve this, and Melba's full of crap and blah, 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 blah. Hey, let's get past all the nonsense. And let's sit down and have an intelligent conversation on what she found, because, you know, it is interesting. And going back to one side's human and the other side is unknown is a little concerning for me personally. But
yeah, you know, there's a lot of talk about Nephilim and stuff like that. Well, I'm not going to say it necessarily means that, but what it could indicate is a mutation, like an undocumented mutation in the human species. People talk about that mongoloid appearance, and they talk about, you know, structural similarities in the skeleton to Neanderthals and stuff like that. Well, maybe it's a side chain of humans that, you know, it has a genetic part there that we don't have it documented because it's just completely unique to them, you know. But I want to say maybe a little surprised and disappointed that she didn't take you up on that offer. I hope she might reconsider that, because I think that'd be great. I think you've got the highest quality Sasquatch show on the internet, personally. That's just my personal opinion. I've been listening for a long time, and I find that the quality of people that you have on there, and so far as like their sincerity that they convey and stuff, I'm pretty good at seeing through baloney stories myself. Not pointing fingers at anybody in particular, but I've heard more than a few where I could tell within a few minutes. You can tell by vocal tone, you can tell by details and stuff like that. And I find that you're very good at finding people that, at the minimum, are sincere. So if she was going to do an interview on a show, I think yours would be a good one for her to do. Yeah, I would hope that she changes her mind.
I hope that she does too. And there's no gotcha moments. And I even said that to her in the message. I was like, there's no gotcha moments on the show. And it's not you're not going to walk into a trap. If I invite you to the show, go listen to 10 episodes or go listen to a couple episodes of my show. There's no gotcha moments. I don't pin anyone against a corner, because you really get nowhere with that. I had to laugh about your vocal tones. That's something a cop would say. You know what I mean? That's your law enforcement coming out, because I hear that from a lot of law enforcement guys. What you just said. I've probably had 30 emails saying that exact same thing. But thank you for the kind words too.
Yeah, sure. I do have a law enforcement background. That is a fact. I have training in behavioral analysis and stuff like that. And then the tone and inflections in people's voice do come into play there, sure. And then, you got to combine it with detail though too. Sometimes people, they leave glaring holes in their details. Like one example, I mean, I won't name names, and I don't think this is going to do any harm to anybody, but I watched a video one time about a Bigfoot encounter where supposedly this guy was way off trail hiking and it got late and he was alone in the woods and all this, and he saw a Bigfoot on a tree and it jumped off the tree and knocked him down, and it bit his arm off at the forearm, and then he's able after this, the Bigfoot chows down on his arm, and then he's able to hike back out and get to safety. You know what I mean? But it's just completely ridiculous. I mean,
yeah, you bleed to death. You're not going to get back up and hike back out.
Yeah,
you're going to sit there.
You'd be unconscious in a minute. Within a minute, So some of them are just glaringly obvious. There's definitely people out there that are telling stories. Off air, I would give you my opinions on it. I have one or two more, but I'll just save it for that.
No, I understand.
Because I don't want to name and shame, and if I tell too much detail, I think it will make it kind of obvious in a case or two. But just leave it at that. But Ms. Ketchum, and thank you for helping me recall her name. I hope that she does actually do an interview in the future. That would be great.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Ned, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your encounter very much. It's terrifying, to break down and be out there and have this happen to you. And I don't think I'd ever take another walk through a dark road in the middle of the night after something like that happened. It's terrifying. It really is. And I know the area well where you're talking about. As you and I talked off the air, I've had many encounters from that area. I had a cop back in the 70s tell me of an encounter, I think, pretty close to where you're at. But I've had a lot of encounters over the years in that area. And, a lot of people think you got to go 50 miles out into the middle of the woods to run into these things. That's not true. Most encounters, if you look them up on a map, there's generally a lot of people around, which is bizarre. It's really bizarre that they're so close to civilization.
Yeah. The geography and everything is laid out in such a way that there is a mode of passage where one could go to and fro completely undetected from the mountains and down into this area. And besides a couple of road crossings that could be very easily done, especially at night, you can see headlights from a mile away. I think half the time when these creatures show themselves on the road in front of cars driving by, I think they must want to be seen, because they can obviously see headlights from very far away if they want to.
It feels that way, doesn't it? It feels like it. It almost feels like they want to be seen. Because you're right, they do. They just kind of stumble out in front of cars, and most wild animals don't do that. I guess except for deer, but
yeah. I don't know if they're getting in a mode where they're in the mood where they don't care, or whether or not every once in a while they get a fancy out of getting a rise out of people. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, it feels that way, doesn't it? Feels that way sometimes. Well, Ned, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your encounter.
My pleasure, absolutely. Thanks for getting a hold of me and having me on the show. It's really appreciated.
Thanks again, Ned. And I want to close out tonight in memory of a listener of mine, Aaron from Dayton, Texas. His wife, Barbara, wrote me a very nice email, and the title of the email is "Thank You for the Memories." My husband passed away suddenly last June. He was 50, and it was very unexpected. He was a member of Sasquatch Chronicles and enjoyed every minute of it. We always listened to your podcast every Sunday. We loved the intro music. It was his ringtone. Even if I was out of town, he'd call me, and we'd listen together. Some of my greatest memories involve you, your guests, and the show. Thank you so very much for what you do. You're the best at it. Your interviewing skills are beyond measure. Basically, I wanted to say thank you. P.S. I listen every day. Just replaying the episodes, it comforts me. Thank you, Barbara.
Drop in the ocean. blue.